Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so what is this? This is simply a font, a free font that I found online, and that I combined a couple of them together to make it look a little bit more personal, and adjusted it some to make a signature of some sort. So because it's just a pixel layer, I can modify it here. For example, I can take my eraser tool and I can make this drop on the R a little bit smaller, and maybe this part of the D. So that looks pretty good. And then I can come over here with my edit tool, and I can use free transform, and I can give it a little.
Did you write it somewhere, Richard?
No, I just did this with script that I got off the
with the script. Oh, with script, right?
with one of the scripts.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Now, is each letter individual, Richard? Or...
No, I typed it. I used the text tool.
Yeah.
okay.
I took the font, and I'll send you where you can get some free fonts if you like.
Okay.
And
but could you take the R and do something with the letter part that comes down and sort of, turn it into more of a curve or whatever?
this one here?
Or, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you create points along it so that you could, like it as if you were using the text tool?
Sure, he said, as if he knew what he was talking about. Transform.
How did you start with that blank layer?
Well, I didn't start with it. I just got it there.
Okay.
So I can do things like that.
Yeah, more. Can you change the color of the font?
I'm sorry?
Can you change the color of the font?
Yeah.
Well, sure, but right now I'm making a brush, so I want it to be black and white.
Okay.
Okay, so I've modified it here a little bit. And I could draw something else on it. Let's see if I could take brush tool here and bring something up like that. And then I could take, if I put it on a layer like I should have. So let's go back. Here, I'm trying to show you how, and I did it wrong. Let's go back to there. I'm going to make a new layer. I just clicked down here on the bottom. Can you see where my cursor is?
Yep.
So I just clicked on that. That gave me a new layer.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to click on my paintbrush tool, and I'm going to click in here and make a line. Let me undo that. That would be Command Control Z. I'm going to turn my smoothing up. Remember we talked about smoothing on a brush? So that'll help you smooth things out. That was the smoothing command up here, as opposed to that yucky thing that I had.
Right.
So I'm going to go back to that original layer here. I'm going to do a selection. I'm going to take my selection tool here. I'm going to click through there, and I'm going to delete that sucker. And I'm going to zoom in here and say, gee, I have a problem there. Okay. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to use my tool here again because I'm just being compulsive with you now.
Could you make a selection of the skinny part and then just expand it?
I could.
Okay, just wondering.
Because this right now is just a pixel layer, right?
Yeah.
Take my brush in here.
Oh.
Click on this one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wrong side. See, I've got to reverse that thing. So let me Command Z it.
All right.
Select. Inverse it. Now I can paint inside. All right.
Yeah.
Go back here. I'm going to select all, or I could have deselected. I'm going to fit the screen. And I think just for giggles, I'm going to put a colored layer behind it now. I'm going to come down here to my tool, get solid color. Click on that. I'm going to pick on white. Okay. I'm going to put the white on the bottom. So far, so good.
Mhm.
Now, I want to make a brush. Do you remember how to do that?
I have the video
You have.
and I wrote the instructions out.
Yeah, me too, Sue.
If I don't use
Right
it
down
every-
here. Define brush.
Define brush set. Yeah, preset.
So you just click on that. And so it'll be Richard's signature. It takes the name of the file as its first default there for PUG. This 827 down here tells you how big it is. And if you remember last time we said that brushes tend to break up as you make them bigger, but they tend to be just fine if you make them smaller. So I'm going to click OK. So I'm not understanding.
You spelled PUD wrong. You called it PUD, like puddle.
Oh, well,
We knew what you meant.
if you
But
don't have a sense of
you know what
humor,
it is. Yeah.
We know what it is.
you know, if I could spell, I would have been an attorney, but it just
Yeah.
doesn't work out that way.
You're more creative than that. I know.
No, I'm just dyslexic. Define brush preset. Click here. Shift P U G. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, PUG. So now I have a brush.
Oh,
And
that's a brush. Is
This
it?
this is now a brush.
Oh,
Now,
So-
will it do the white when you do the brush or just the Richard when you do the brush?
Just the Richard.
Just the Richard.
really?
Okay, so let's go
You
here.
made a Richard brush.
I made a Richard brush. So
Oh.
here's the brush. Click up into here. Richard
No.
signature plug. See it right here?
Yep.
Click.
Now, will one click put it on?
There it is.
Wow.
I just click that sucker in. So now
Yeah.
some document, they
Yeah.
want me to sign my life away. I now have a signature.
But your R is cut off. Is that a
Well,
problem?
that's because I put the brush in the wrong place. Boy,
Okay,
picky,
okay.
Picky.
I know. I just want to make sure that was what it was.
Click.
Okay.
But you could make it this size pretty
Yeah.
big. so it
Yeah.
wouldn't-
Yeah.
I could. You see the outline here of the brush right there?
But you can insert it into a document and then copy and paste
Yeah,
into,
Because I
on an
pasted it on
image.
right. Yeah, exactly.
and then with free transform under it, you can make it smaller and
Yeah.
put it where you want.
Yeah, you just, mine is as a brush, my signature, and that little dial that comes up, I just use that
Yeah.
if I want to
Angle
angle it
it.
in a certain way, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I just move the thing to make it up and down, or if I want a different color, I just
Yeah.
go to the
Yeah.
color thing and press the color.
Oh,
You
And
can use a
change
color picker
Okay,
too.
so now
color
if
picker.
if I treat it as a brush, you see it's gonna down here. I was on the bottom was the brush. Scooping up here is just using it as a stamp.
Right.
So it'll do both. So that that's a pretty simple way to make a brush.
Uh,
And I have several. I have Richard Tyndall, I have Richard Tyndall Photography, yeti. So
You could also
That-
do a layer, couldn't you?
I'm sorry.
Just save it as a layer. You could save it as
No.
a layer.
And I
Oh, you
couldn't save it as a layer, but I could save it in my library as an image.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
As an image.
As an
Yeah.
image. And I've
Yeah.
done that too. So
Yeah.
sometimes you want one, sometimes you want another.
Yeah.
I'm just showing you can make a brush out of almost anything because we're going to make a couple of brushes here. For example, those of you who are into wanting to buy some of those fancy sets, one of the guys is selling a set of bird stamps brushes. Did you see that one? One of his
no.
big things is you could put birds into the background of your picture. So this image here is from one of those free sites.
Oh,
So it's just a series of birds. And what I did first is cut them out.
Individually.
No, I did them as a group, but I select them one at a time. So let's go back.
That's what I meant. Yeah. Select them one at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only because I wanted to get,
You'd
When I-
have to.
well, I could have selected them all at once, but the problem was that I didn't get the definition on the birds that I wanted. That dropped out some various pieces.
Ah,
So I came down, let's just say they're here. I can use, and it's usually a good idea to try the, the fancy dancy stuff. So I just, let's see what happens when you do select subject. And you see it caught this bird, this bird, this bird, but not this bird.
Mhm.
And it didn't collect this bird very well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go down here. And what's wrong with it? Well, it missed a big hunk of it and it's got some stuff that I don't want. So at this point, I can refine the selection. And I would normally do that with the quick selection tool. That's up here on the tool thing, the
Mhm.
top one, up where the magic wand is and the object selection
Mhm.
tool is.
Yeah.
And it comes with a plus or a minus. And if you play with the size of the brush that you use in selected, it becomes more or less sensitive to what you want. So that cleaned up its head pretty nicely. And we got this funky part down here, and I got a piece of the wing that's missing here. So I would come in and I would look at that, and then I would pick another tool that I thought would help me select that better. So what have I got? I want to get rid of this piece of sky that's back in here, and I want to add this piece of feather
Mhm.
that's here, right?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I could just take the quick selection tool first and have it select that piece of feather. That worked out pretty nicely. And then I'll pick my polygonal lasso tool. And I like that only because it works really well with the palsy or too much scotch. And you see I've got the minus sign on it.
Hmm.
How did you do that?
Okay.
That
Let
option.
yeah,
Did-
it's right. It's out here on the
It's a
top. Let me
box
just,
somewhere.
let me just get it caught first
Yeah.
and then I'll show
Okay.
you.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring it out to here and hit enter. So that took it away. Now, where
Yeah.
was it? It's right up here.
Oh,
So this is pick the thing. This is add on to the selection. This is take away from the
Oh,
selection.
thank you.
And this
Perfect.
is for merging the selections.
Okay. Great.
We can also feather the size of the selection right here.
Great.
And you can do the select and mask. That's where it puts the colored piece on it. So now I have picked this bird up pretty nicely. So if I hit Command Control and the letter C for copy. Okay, and then if I hit Command Control and the letter V for paste, it's right there. So there the bird is without a background. So those are the first three birds. And that could be enough, but for our exercise, I want you to have all four. So there are all four. So we've got some options here. We could try and paste them in with this foliage and stuff on them. I'm sorry, this variegation in their feathers. It ain't a tree, it's a bird. So we can use a levels adjustment layer to help darken them. Okay, and that's this tool here. And that basically I first used it to get rid of the background. But see how they're getting darker?
Yeah.
So I'm getting rid of that. So I'm making more silhouettes there.
Silhouettes. Right.
So now I've got 4 bird silhouettes. Yeah, that actually is really good for this. So now, once again, I have a choice. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make some birds. So I'm up in here. What I normally would do is collapse it. Let's do the stamp visible routine. There they are. So I have a layer now with those birds on it. And I'm just going to select one.
Richard, would you say that again? You turned it off because you didn't want to make a resolution?
Oh, before when I was making the masks, I had set the setting here for being 1-to-1, a square.
I see. Okay.
Okay, and that means I'm stuck with a square, which is usually good, but yeah, I'm being conservative here. So I want to get rid of it being a square. Well, if I made it, let's say a 5x7, that actually is a pretty good ratio for this. I could switch it. That's this little arrow between the two sizes. I can do that. So that brings it in. Oftentimes it'll give you a pixel size here, but I want to see what I can get from the size of the picture I have here. And if I just want to make it whatever it's going to be, I can come down here. Where did it go? Just to the width by height and resolution button. And I can click on that. Then I get 3 blank panels. And if I have 3 blank panels, then I can move these independent of each other. Does that make sense?
It's like an unrestrained crop.
Unrestrained, yeah, pretty much.
Mhm.
So I'm going to accept that. So now I have my birds. Edit, define brush. I'm going to call this pair. I'm going to click OK. There they are.
Ooh.
So that's two birds. So now I have that brush defined. Now, just to be curious, I wonder how big it is. So I come up here to image size, and if we go to pixels, so this is 1,000 by 600 basically, or 900 by 700. So that gives me a lot of detail there. And as I make them smaller as a brush or larger, I'm not going to lose any of these feathers on the ends. Okay. So to go back, I'm just going to my history states. And I'm just going to click back to when it was all there. So I had these two. And I'm going to guess if I had just one other bird, I would probably pick this one because you would recognize it as being a bird easily, right? So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to go back to my crop tool. This time I'm going to make a square 1 by 1. We can make an editing brush. So let's take another picture. So what I've got here is I want to make a brush to do basic editing, like dodging and burning, maybe putting in color tints. And one of the problems, and we've talked about this before, is that we want to use usually a soft brush so people can't see the edges. And the problem oftentimes is that when you use a brush over and over again, it becomes recognizable. The people can see the edges. So an oddly shaped will read out better for this kind of a brush. And clouds are a good place to get them. And, we're in Florida, we get lots of clouds. So what I'm going to do, all right, so I'm just going to edit that out. So now I have a single cloud. Well, that's not going to work very well as a brush. So probably the first thing I would do is turn it into a black and white. And we can do that lots of ways. Let's do it the easy way. Up here, image, adjustments, desaturate. That's a black and white image. Well, that's not making me real warm and fuzzy. So what do you think I could do to make that have more contrast?
Black background.
Well, yeah. How am I going to do that?
I have no idea.
What if you selected the background and then used edit brightness and contrast, or whatever it is, brightness
Yeah.
and contrast, or do it in curves?
Well, the curves is or levels is the way we're going to do it. And the problem is we've got these areas of gray that I want to save in the cloud because that's what's going to make my brush nice and soft. So I'm just levels. If you're not used to using levels, is a marvelous tool. So I can return that. So now I have it darker. Anything else I could do? Well, yeah, I could pick part of this and I could use my channels as the selection tool. And by the way, we've used like 4 different selection tools so far. Have you noticed that? That's the selection part of this class. So if I come over here to channels, I have the channels that are in the picture. We got the RGB, but we have a red channel, a green channel, and a blue channel. Had we done this when it was still a color picture, we would have been able to get more sync. So let's go back to that. Let's turn this off for now. Let's go back to this one. And I'm going to make a copy of this. I can do it by doing a Command or Control J, or I can just duplicate the layer. If I duplicate the layer, it's a smart object, so it's going to be locked to the other smart object. If I wanted to deal with a smart object independently, I would want to make a copy via a new smart object via copy. So let's do that. So now I have two smart objects, which are two raw files that operate independently from each other. Remember that trick? So let's look at that. I'm going to click on this. It's going to go back to being the first original picture in RAW. And I can play with this picture a little bit. Maybe increase the texture some. That's kind of fun. Okay, so now I've got some different tones of gray and whites in that cloud. So I'm going to click OK. So what happens is that this one has the changes we just made, and that's the original. Those are two raw objects that are working from it with each other independently. So I'm going to take this one. I'm going to do a Command J this time to make a copy, and I'm going to rasterize this, which means I simply made it into a pixel layer. I'm going to turn these two off. I'm going to go to my channels, and now that's my red channel. That's my green channel. That's my blue channel. Which one has the best contrast? The blue, the green, or the red?
Red.
Red.
The red has the best contrast.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take this red channel and I'm going to pull it down here next to the trash can. There's a new layer thing there. Open that up, and I've made a copy of the red channel. Right?
Mhm.
While I'm there, I can take my image, adjustments, levels, and I can play so that's a nice contrasted picture, don't you think?
Mhm.
So there it is.
And Richard, the reason you made the red copy was because you didn't want to interfere with what the underlying? Why did you have to make a copy of that? Why couldn't you have just
Why couldn't I have just what?
done it on the original red?
Well, because I'm modifying it, and I don't want to
Okay.
modify the original picture.
Got it.
And this is also to show you where selections go, because
Mhm.
all selections are stored in the channels layer.
Oh, okay.
So I've got it here, and I can, if I hit Command and click on the picture. First, let me get rid of this escape. See, when I hit Command on the picture, I make a selection of what's in that photograph. Okay. All right, I'll live with that. Okay, so if we look at this baby, we don't want a bunch of other stuff on here, do we? And if we're going to make a mask, we want this to be the white part. So I just made a stamped visible of that. I'm going to create a solid color adjustment layer. We want a white background. We'll put that under here. I'm going to take this image here and I'm going to invert it. So if I'm doing a mask, I probably don't want this part to be part of my brush. Would you agree?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so what I can do now is I can just take my eraser tool. I can just erase it. All right. So now what I need to do is adjust this picture some more. So let's try levels again. And
Could you have cropped that
well, I
other
will.
cloud out?
I'm gonna at some point here. Now, I've got a pretty nice black and white difference. I've got some issues down in here, right?
Mm.
So I'm just going to go ahead and use my white brush. Well, here I got here. And with the black brush. No, it's not. All right, this is my properties for the layers adjustment. If I hit this little button here, it's going to adjust it so it just goes down to the level below. Ever remember that? So I'm going to go back here to the level below. I'm going to use my white paint. Oh, where did that come from? What is that? Anybody?
It's a bird.
Bird.
It's a bird. Because we didn't change the bird brush is still in there. So I've got to come up here and pick a different brush. And I'm just going to use the hard one here. I'm going to use my left bracket key to make it. Bracket key is the one that's up there by the letter P. And all I'm doing now is getting rid of stuff. So now I've got a fairly irregular figure. Everybody see how I got there?
Yes.
Oh,
Kind of got lost along the way, but
well, that's only because I'll clean that up in the video for you. But the problem is I wanted to make a black and white image that was irregular. And I think this qualifies. It's irregular.
Mm.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and crop it. I'm still set on a square. So if I bring this in, it's probably close enough for government work. And the center of this brush is going to be right here. So it's going to have a dark side and a lighter side. Can you see that?
Does that center icon always pop up like that?
Yep, but you can put it wherever you want.
Okay.
Any of it.
So, and why would you do that? Let's say with the birds, you wanted them to twitter and flit around. You could put it so that when it stamped them in, it wouldn't stamp them where you think the center of the bird is. Or let's say when I chose the bird, the center point was off by his head, but I wanted it to be in the middle of his body. I could use that circle to put it there. All right. So we've got that done. I'm going to hit return. So now we have this thing. I wonder how big this baby is. Image size, 800. That's a pretty big brush. So why don't we make this 400 pixels. Okay.
Hmm.
Now you can make it whatever you want. I'm just showing you. So now we've got it. And what we're going to do now is we're going to define a brush preset. Cloud. What should we call it?
Black cloud.
Schnauzer.
Black.
Mickey Mouse Cloud.
Looks like an ink blot.
Okay, so this is now a cloud editing brush. Okay, and it's 400 pixels square. Remember, we talked about that before.
Mhm.
So I'm going to click OK. And now I have that brush. That
Cool.
marks. Okay, well, all well and good, but is there any more we can do about this? No. You know this is going to be in trouble because I'm reaching for my notes. So here I've got a brush, and I'm going to come up here and click on this tool here. You can find them up here. If you come up here to Windows, and this is brush settings right here, and that's this window here. And it allows us to put attributes onto the brush we're building. That we have a pile of things we can do. I think that does it to adjust it. So let's look at the, so we can click on the name here, and it gives us a chance to make some adjustments to this brush. We can set its size. So right now the size is set at 400. If I decided that was really too big, I could bring this back down to, let's say, 200. So that's going to make my brush smaller. I can there it's smaller than it was before. I can flip it on the X angle or the Y angle. That's what this one does. Here I can rotate it. So there it is. And let's say that I wanted to make my brush more like that. Okay. I can work with the roundness here. So right now it's set at 100%. If I set it at 50%, it becomes more of a ellipse. So 100% will make it as round as it was when I picked it. Spacing, and that's what this little thing down here has to do, talks about how far apart the brush will be when you're putting it down. So spacing can go from a line like this, and I suppose I should have a picture, make this smaller. Well, if I do, see how it's, as I'm trying to move it, jumps a big hunk. And if I bring it down into here, it'll move about like that. And 25 is a pretty good number for our purposes. So that's setting what this brush is going to do. So far, so good?
Mhm. Yeah, there's a preview on the bottom.
Right.
And you
That's
were
what
changing it,
this,
yeah.
that's what this thing down
Yeah.
here does. If I was going to make a stamp brush like the name, I would set the spacings out so I could see it. Okay. But because I want to make an actual brush, I'm probably going to move this out. And 25 is a good number, but yeah, it's adjustable. So the next one has to do with shape dynamics. Just leave a white piece of paper there. So shape dynamics, that's this one here. And click it on. And nothing changes here. Nothing changes here. And this, by the way, is all the brushes, that I've got going. We talked about that before. There's a lot of them here. And that's way too many to be useful. So let's go back here to shape dynamics. If you click on the name, it gives you a new field, a new thing to work with. So this has to do with what you're going to do with this piece down in here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here to brush spacing. I'm going to move the spacing out so we can see it a bit better. All right, shape dynamics. So we have the size jitter, and that means how much, as you're moving the brush along, is it going to change its size? Okay, so you see how the new one got smaller down here? Small, medium, small, larger, larger, larger down. See that? So the brush, as you're painting with it, is going to get larger and smaller. The minimum diameter means based on what it is, or whatever you set the brush to be, how much of that are you willing to get on the small size? And I'm going to guess that for most things, probably, yeah, maybe 30%. So that the smallest it can get is 30% of whatever the maximum size is. See how that's working?
Mhm.
Angle jitter means how much are you going to let it spin on its axis as it goes? See them down there?
Mhm.
So here the little ticket is there. Now it's here. It moves there. See how it's turning as it's painting?
Mhm.
Roundness has to be, do you want it to move to being like, see how it's changing its circumstance there? I normally leave that one alone. All right, so that's that one, and we can flip it. So what's going to happen is every now and then it's going to flip itself over as you're moving. That's what this flip X jitter's for. Okay. So I'm creating this brush and it's going to do these things when I work with it. Scattering, and by the way, I clicked on the name, which means I got the new screen. Scattering determines about how the brush is going to change. See how it's moving there? It's scattering itself out. And you can tell it to do it on a certain count. You can change the count. So that's what this one does. Texture allows you to add different pattern scales to the tip as it moves. I don't use that one very often. Shape dynamics.
Richard, I have a question.
Yeah.
So we got this dialog box for the brush settings, and I get it. But where is it telling me, other than the preview, that this is the brush that I'm working on? Because we named this brush.
Because you selected it when you started the job. It's right here. When we selected it here to do the work, I could have selected it down that pulled off. If I knew which one it was, I could have picked it from here.
Oh, okay.
But if you pick the brush first, then it's what it loads in there.
It's what's okay. So that's what's telling me that's the active brush being modified.
Yes. Yes.
And so these tick marks, as we're starting in the top coming down, that's totally up to us to choose or not choose then.
Yeah. Depends what you, because we're creating dynamics of a brush. Now you can change a brush on the fly while you're using it. I said, on this case, I want it to be more jittery, and you can click that in here, but you can also now create a set brush, and I'm going to show you that in a second, that will carry all of these characteristics with it every time you choose it, which is why this becomes important for this project.
Great, thanks.
Color dynamics allows you to pick two colors down in here, and it will work. Let's go click on that. It will allow you to jump between these two colors or any colors along a path between them and mix those colors up. So if you're trying to paint like a Monet kind of a background, you could pick two shades of green and have the brush automatically change itself as it's painting with those colors. So that's what that one does. And if you're a painter, if you're a digital painter, this is a really great job. I don't know that it works very well for photographers. This will add noise to the edges of a brush. And wet edges is when if you work with watercolors, there'd be more color on the edges of a brush and less in the center. That's what wet edges does. Build up means that as you hold the brush in place, and it'll build up more paint even if you don't move it. That's what that one does. Smoothing is important because it allows the smoothing switch up here to work. If this is not checked on, this will not work. So all of your brushes should have that. So all I've done on this one is done shape dynamics, scattering, and texture. And so that's all of these things. So I've done all this stuff. I'm going to go back up here to the brush sizing, and I'm going to bring the spacing back. So now you can get a feeling for what that brush is going to do is to paint with it. Okay. So I've done all these things. And what I'm going to do now is click on this little box down here. And this is where I now will take that brush and set it as its own special brush. So we've already got the brush called Cloud Editing. So this will be Cloud Editing 1. Okay. And I'm going to include the tools, and I'm going to click OK. So now I have another new brush. So I have Cloud Editing PUG 1. So if I want to go back and work on this again, is I can come in here, take this same brush now, and let's say I want to change it so that when I use it, the flow is going to be 30%. So I'm going to take the 30% down to here. So that's a flow of 30%, just like I was using the brush. I have not changed anything else. I'm going to come down here, and this will be Cloud Editing. PUG 1 FLO flow 30. And I've got save the tool says. I click OK. Go back up here and look at our tools. Here they are. There's Cloud Editing. There's Cloud Editing at 30%. And there's the Cloud Editing without any of these customizations. So I've got 3 different brushes there. And I can take those brushes and use them, for example, when I'm going to dodge and burn. So let's go back for a second here and chat. Have I left you deeply in the woods at this point?
Definitely.
A little. Well,
Not too bad.
at some point, one of you asked me, actually a couple of you asked, should I go out and buy this $75 collection of 4,000 brushes? And the answer is no. Unless there's something there you desperately have to have. I showed you last time where you can get a whole pile of free artsy-fartsy brushes, right? Photoshop will give, Adobe will give you that for free. And I showed you where you could collect all the brushes that came with it. That's a pile. And just now, I've taught you how to make the 3 most important ones that they sell you. And that's a special editing brush. The birds and backgrounds, you could put little kids with kites on it if you want to, that's part of your technique. But birds seems to be harmless. Birds would look nice in the picture behind me. And now I can add them without having to go out and find my own birds. I stole them. And the signature. So you can make them as you go. You don't need to. So far, so good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. The other thing is you can take these brushes and you can put them into actions. Well, we're going to do that here in a second. So let's go back to, no other questions before I go back?
Nope.
Remember, the brushes are black and white. You could make them a colored brush and have it save the color. That was one of your options when you made the specialized brush. So let's say you always wanted to have
Richard,
yes.
when you first make it,
Yep.
You said, should we just have, like when you make it, should you just have that smoothing checked?
Yes.
And then if we do anything else, then those are in new brushes from that same brush.
Well, the smoothing was, you have that choice at the top of the menu to make your pen work be smooth. And I remember when I made that first tail on the Richard on the letter
Right.
R, and the first time I drew it, it was kind of for walking. So I upped the smoothing, which told Photoshop that when I draw the line, try and make it look like I don't have palsy. Which is,
So does that box automatically open on that bar?
it's on the
Even if
bar,
I didn't check?
but if you haven't checked it when you made the brush, it won't work.
Okay.
So let's say on the signature, I made my signature and I don't want you mucking with it. Okay, that's it. Or I made a logo. I don't want you to do nothing with my logo. Then I would turn the smoothing off. so that you couldn't. And there's a couple more tricks. We're going to talk about those right quick too. All right.
Okay.
That works so far?
Mhm.
So let me go back here and go back to share screen. And this time, let's do the desktop. So now you should be able to see the layers up in here. Now, when you're looking at the brush, see these little padlocks?
Mm-hmm.
If you lock something down, someone can't change it on that brush. Any other brush, when you go to use it, you can make these changes on the brush for that one-time use, or make it save it as a new brush. But if you lock it, a person can't go in and edit it. All right?
Can
And
you
this,
unlock it? Can you
if you-
unlock it?
yeah, when you make it, but if it's
Locked?
locked, then they can't go into that brush and muck it with it. So that's what these are about. So that's to keep someone from editing on the side on your stuff. Okay, so this is that smoothing
So,
control, and it's
I have a quick
because it's,
question.
yeah,
So the locking is if you're going to make the brush available to somebody else.
yeah, or you don't want someone to accidentally change it. You don't want yourself to accidentally change it.
Right. Right. So for me and my own purposes, I create my own brushes. I
Yep.
lock it just to make sure I don't goof on
Yeah,
myself.
but
But
I
I
never
have the
lock mine.
opportunity to go back. I
Yeah.
have the opportunity to go back and unlock it.
Yep,
It's
you do.
just when I share the brush with somebody else, they use it on a different computer or who knows.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Just like you can lock a layer.
Right.
You know, it's the same how I can lock a layer, but then I can go back and unlock the layer. It's exactly the same kind of a phenomenon.
Okay, Richard. So if I use the brush as my signature,
Yep.
What should I have locked on there? So, say you share a picture, can they do anything to that signature?
Well, if you give them your Photoshop file with all the layers available, then
Uh-huh.
the answer is of course they can. If you collapse it, then they can't. Let's try that again. If I send you this file with all of these layers available, can you go in and change my edits?
You're saying yes. I don't know if I could. Yes.
Yeah, you could. If I give you this file, this Photoshop file with all these layers, or a TIFF file with all these layers, you can go back and do whatever you want to it. But if I collapse them, if I come down here and flatten the image, boom, discard things. Now you've only got this one thing. That's all that's there. They can't go in and change it because it's all one set of pixels.
Okay, so what if I want to share the image, but I want to keep all of that data for me? So do you suggest that I just make a copy of the PSD and then collapse from my copy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you could do what I just collapse this, right? So now I'm just going to send you a JPEG of this, and I'll do that with export. And then I'm going to come back up here to my history states, and I'm going to undo it, and then I'll save it again.
Oh,
That's why that history states is so good. Or Command Z.
I
One
did not realize after you flatten it that you can go back into the history. So thank you for showing that.
I didn't either. I didn't either.
I didn't
Dallas.
either. So if you collapse it, save it, shut down the computer, reopen it up, you can uncollapse it.
You're out of luck then.
Okay, you have to
'Cause
do it before
This
you.
is only kept during the session you're working on.
That's right. Okay.
You can also go into edit and undo, right?
Not after you saved it.
No, not after you've saved it, but
Oh,
if
yeah.
you collapse it.
Okay, here, we're going to collect it again here. It's collapsed. I can go edit, undo change state, edit, undo flatten image. There they are. But if I do another step after I flattened it, I'd have to use the history to go back, because the undo, depending on how many you've saved, is not as good a tool for that.
But if I only send it as a JPEG,
Yep.
it won't have all that data in it.
Nope, it won't.
Okay.
No, it won't. So let's
So Richard, if I work on an image and I want to send it to you, how
Yep.
do I send it with all that information in there?
Well, you would do is you would send it either as a PSD or a TIFF with layer. It'll be a big file, so you probably have to put it in Dropbox or put it on a flash drive and hand it to me.
Thank you.
This stock image of a young woman is going to be our subject for the next part. Before I did much of anything else, I just generally cleaned her up. I got rid of some of the blemishes. But we're talking about brushes today, so I thought I'd use one of the brushes that's been provided. And we're going to select a brush. I've got it on a blank layer. And I'm just going to set the crosshairs up here close to her lash and paint it in. I painted it in black because she has black lashes, and whereas that's a nice lash and better than what she had, it doesn't do very much because it doesn't match her eye. I'm going to select the eye, come to transform, and use the warp tool. So using the warp tool, I can now begin to bend that eyelash. So now the eyelash conforms to the eye. Let's see what happens if I just move it up here just a little bit. And I'm going to say, okay. So now I have a new eyelash, which is way more dramatic than it was before. And that might be a little intense, so I can take my opacity and just bring it down a little bit to something that I think looks a bit more natural. What else can I do with this? Well, I should be able to take the eraser tool and maybe just touch it up here a little bit. So I'm going to say, okay, so we put a brush in to make new eyelashes. So we need to do that on both sides. I think that's an improvement. One lash, the other lashes. As long as we're working with makeup, we can take another brush and simply paint in a piece of eyeliner to give the eyes more definition. And once again, I brought the opacity down to about half its strength because this is not a nightclub scene. It's supposed to be more like the great outdoors. And while we're at it, we can take and paint in her lips. And that was simply using a regular round brush and painting it in and reducing the opacity to get the color I wanted. That seemed a little intense to me. So bringing it down to 39, 40%. Looked a little bit more like daytime makeup to me. Let's go ahead and look at the eyes. Another brush that we talked about that's available is for the iris. And so you can just take the iris brush with a color. I picked the color from her dress and put it in. So I just stamped it in for color. And then I added a layer on top of that and removed the places where it overlapped her eyelashes. So what else did I do here? I liquefied her face. So I've got a stamp visible here. I'm going to come up here to filter, liquefy, and I'm going to look at the face liquefying, can increase her smile. And eye size, right hand eye. Let's make that maybe just a little bit bigger. And I think the height's good. Come down, we did the mouth, face-shaped forehead. Nice forehead there. Face width. Maybe narrow it up just a little bit. So we changed her face a little bit to get back into my creative desire here. And that's on this the stamped visible layer here. So it was before. So it is now. Yeah, it's pretty close to what I had before. Now, so looking at this thing, the next thing I've added in here are catch lights. Once again, that's just a little white brush. And when I did that, if we come in here and look, there are catch lights in the original picture. All I did here was reinforce them. When looking at this picture, color grading helps bring everything together again so that it's a tighter unit. And using the painter's color wheel, I decided that my key color or my main color was her skin. And that's kind of in this orange right up in here. So using a split complementary color scheme, what I'm going to want to do is add some more purples and some of this blue-green tint to her. And I did that with a curves adjustment layer and made her dress more of the purple color. So that begins to give me a relationship here. Then using a gradient map, I brought the colors of the water closer in keeping with this other leg. And then the last problem here, I just changed the intensity of the purple dress to make it less intense, more in keeping with this kind of blue purple hue. And then I wasn't happy with how these feathers were turning out. So what I did is I neutralized that and turned that blue into a gray so that it wasn't intense. So I now have picked up my color grade of orange, blue purple, and blue green to create a unified image. Workflow gets bandied around a lot as to some magical thing. Every picture is going to have a different workflow because it's going to need different things. So when I was talking about style the other night, your workflow is part of your style. What you want is a workflow that doesn't get in your way. So do I think there is one? And the answer is, well, of course I think there is one. For me, other than a few basic things I'm going to do at the front end, workflow is taking care of what's the most annoying first and working your way down to whatever's the least annoying. But that's my workflow. You might say, I got to brighten it, I got to size it, I got to do this, I got to do that. And that's fine. Some people do that. But it needs to be structured but flexible. So not rigid like you need to go see a shrink, but not so flexible that you know earthly good. Somewhere between those two extremes. All right, Donna, you have that look on your face like you're not convinced.
No, I am.
All right.
I know I have my little workflow and how I progress on some of my, except when I get to the detail stuff like this, it's.
Well, that's fair, but it's all part of it. So what I thought, any questions about what we've just done? I think we've pretty well massacred brushes, at least for now.
How much do you charge for your brush package that you could email us?
Boy, I've been giving it to you guys right along. Yeah. Now,
It seems like a lot
if
of work.
Social Security continues to go down, I may well have to ask for money, but right now.
Especially if we don't get paid next month.
Well, yeah, but I've got a tin cup that I saved from back in the day. I'm more than happy to use it. All right, well, let's go back and look at a project. So I'm going to go back to the desktop.
Yeah.
All right, now last time someone asked me about these lines, and I use the lines when I'm building things, and I just ignore them. So to get rid of these lines, and these are construction lines, where you click on the piece over there, and you drop it in. This, for example, I would have used to figure if I wanted to try and straighten that telephone pole. This would tell me what straight was. So you just grab this move tool over here and you grab onto it and just pull it out of the way. You could turn it off, but it's not so hard just to move it out of the way. When Bob and I were in Scotland, we were driving up to this site to look at this sucker from another angle. And we stopped by the side of the road for a few moments, and I was moved, and I took this photograph, not knowing why. I just shot it. So that's kind of what I ended up with. That's what I started with. That's what I ended up with. And I think that's more in keeping with what I thought I saw. Do I care about the farmhouse down here?
No.
Obviously
No,
not.
probably
And
not.
and is the telephone pole part of what makes my heart go pitter patter? No. So this is my workflow. And the first thing that I do when I start one of these suckers out is I bring in the raw image, which is what this is here, and I save it as a smart object. And therefore, things that I do inside are adaptable. I can go back and click on them and get them. And in case somebody asks me, this is what I shot it at. And because I'm currently enamored with it, I ran it through the DxO to see what it would do. And boy, isn't that nice? So that's a whole lot better. So what did I do next? The next thing I decided is I wanted to take care of the color cast. So remember we did on the color cast, we took and did image, we did a average. Let's go back up so you can see it. Filter, blur, average blur, and what average blur took all the colors that are in the image and turned it into one color. Remember that? And then if we pick the opposite of that color, we should take, the theory is that we'll take out the color cast. And that's what this one here did. I just did a blur average of this image, and then I inverted it, and I got a color that took out the color cast. And then I did
Richard,
some more.
I have a basic question.
Sure.
I have a basic question for you. You brought it in as a raw image. Why didn't you just duplicate it? Why did you go to a smart image? What's, I always thought that if you did Control J and you made a duplicate image, you'd work on the duplicate and save the raw. I don't see the advantage to a smart.
All right, here's the raw image. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it. I get rid of this. I'm on this raw image, and I look at it and I said, I think I can do something with that raw. I brought it in. Let me go back and do an edit on it. I click on this, and that takes me back to my raw editor. And in here now I can say, I think I'm going to lighten that pumpkin a little bit and maybe up the contrast a sad. And I'm going to fix the dehaze. And I'm going to go, okay. So now it goes back and I was able to edit. So now I'm going to do something else with it. I can't do that. I'm going to do this with it. And I say, if I would have done something else with that raw, I can go back here to my raw editor. I can click on this now. I can go back to my raw edit and I can change it again. That's why I do that. Click OK. So now this changed, but the image that I had down here changed. So that's why I make that a smart object.
What's the DxO?
DxO is another editing program, which brings in, it's another raw editor in this case, that does lens corrections really, really, really well and takes out noise like there's nobody's tomorrow.
Is it costly?
It's a one-time buy, but I think it has probably the best noise reduction on the market right now. Although that one in Lightroom and in Camera Raw is awfully good. We did that last week. Go look at last meetings. Was it last meeting or the meeting before I did the raw demonstration? It was last time. There's a section in there where I go through DxO, Topaz, and the Lightroom Camera Raw noise reduction filters.
So it's better than Topaz's denoise?
Yeah, I think so. It has less artifacts on most things. On most things. Okay, so I'm going to adjust the sky. and then change the exposure on the sky. And look what's happening. Can you see that I'm starting to get a little color coming into my sky? So what I'm trying to do now is to fix that. And then I decided I was probably losing some detail in there. So I made a stamped visible so that whatever I was doing below here is not affected. Now I can make changes up in here, and then I can turn this off later so I can still have these controls.
Richard, when you said that, there was one question I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
And that was related to sometimes if I go back to a picture that's below, it doesn't carry the changes back up to something that I've done. And I know that if I go to Topaz or one of those programs, it's not going to, because it's pulling in what was there.
Right.
But how do I know when it's going to carry forward and
Well,
when it's not? Did
if I
that
put
carry because you had a
if you have a pixel layer like this one or this one, it blocks whatever's below it. Okay, so if
Okay.
I turn this one on, it doesn't matter what I do down here, because this one has taken the summary of all of this stuff and put it here as a placeholder. Now, I will often do that so that I can make changes without worrying about messing stuff up, and then I'll turn it back off. So like here's a color adjustment layer I did right there. See it? Now, if I turn this off, the color adjustment layer still is doing what it's supposed to do. That was another color adjustment. So that's what's happening here. If I put this on, when I took out the fence post and all that stuff, it's hidden because it was stamped here. And that's another way to make this file smaller. Let's say I'd gotten to this point. I was pretty happy with where I was at. I would do a stamp visible before any of these layers had been built, and I would save that whole file, okay, as edition 1. Then I would keep the stamp visible, and I would delete all these layers and start building from there the next set of work. And then I'd save that set as edit 2. So I can always go back and find my edits. So this is a color adjustment layer where I took out that red. Now, can you see that I am building this thing, trying to get rid of what bothers me, the burst as I go along? Okay, so I came up into here. Then I decided I wanted some more detail. I did a high pass filter. So that did a high pass filter on everything. I got nice detail up here on my ridge in the Old Manor store, but I got more crunchiness down in here than I wanted. So I just made a mask. Right? So I'm letting that sharpening only come through the mountain, not the grass and not the sky. Okay. Then I brought in from an outside vendor, a company called Boris FX, we'll play with someday if you like. And I brought in their fog filter because I thought I liked that fog better than I liked, that fog. So I just brought in a fog, and then I did some more touch-up. What's the touch-up? Well, see this kind of ridge line back in here, built line, and there's some fence posts down in here. So I just touched those up. And then I still wasn't sure because I didn't know what I was going to do with this barn. So I took the fog brush that we had built before, one of the brushes that I've given you, and I added some fog to try and make the barn seem less important. Did a color grading in here. I'm doing it not because I want to get a particular effect like a movie theater effect, but because I want to bring in the same colors or the complementary colors throughout the picture to get a balance or a harmony in the colors. It's a more subtle way of doing color correcting. And so I played with the curve layer to see what I liked there. And then having done this, I said, well, all right, that probably works. So I want to see what would it be like if I cropped it. So I cropped it, and rather than actually crop it, I made a window using this selection tool up here, about the size that I wanted, and I made a picture. So there was my first attempt at the finished picture. So what do you think of that sucker? Does it move you?
I like it.
Yeah, I liked it too, but it didn't move me.
I find it a little washed out.
Well, fog
To
does
move,
that.
to move. Yeah, I know. I wouldn't take a picture of fog.
Well, I'm trying
Not-
myself. So I said, well, maybe the reality is what did I like? Well, really, the hill was nice, but the picture's not about the hill.
Right.
Picture's about this rock.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
rather than unformatted and formatted again, I just did another set of blacks. I did it a couple of times. The first time I did it like that. I made it a little bit smaller. And I said, well, yeah, what happens if I do? No, that kind of looks better.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so now without cropping it, I have worked my way up into crop it. And I said, well, yeah, well, let's try something else. And what I did is I cropped it again.
Yeah.
So that's 1/7. That's another statement. Okay.
How
So
were you doing that without, did you just say you were not cropping it?
I'm not cropping it. So let's go back. Let's turn these off.
Good, Virginia. I don't get it either.
Oh, sure you do.
No.
I'm just doing magic. That's all. All right. So there's the picture, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is what am I going to do? I'm going to take this and I'm going to add a new layer. Okay. And then I've got these numbers up in here. I'm going to take the selection tool. I'm going to say, you know what I think I want is a picture that looks maybe
Oh,
like
yeah.
there's that picture. Got rid of that damn barn. So if I put black paint into that, I'm going to black out the picture that I want. But what I could do is come down here instead. I could make a solid colored layer. I could make it black. Okay. I could come up here and I could invert that. So now I have what looks like the crop that I want. Now, if I decide that I was wrong, all I have to do is change the mask, which is what I was doing in all of these pictures up in here. So I think I want to take some more out of here. So I'm going to make another layer, new layer, click. And I'm going to say, I'll take that same box. And I say, well, what happens if I got rid of that much of it? That much, back, thing, bingo, black.
it's a good way of not destroying it and doing a what if. Yeah.
Well, I want to let's move that baby down. Oh, there, it's fun. I like that. Or, that's pretty good. So this allows me to do a lot of playing without destroying it. This is totally non-destructive. I'm sure it's not showing because it's barely showing up here. There it is. I'm building this path is what I was trying to build. And I did it by making layers. Did you see that line just jump up?
Yeah.
All right, so the idea is that I would create a line that would bring you along this ridge as if you were walking up to help lead you into the picture. Now, you saw that before, but you didn't see it, right? It was one of those kind of subconscious things. And I could make it bigger, more bright, right? And then I could bring down the opacity to whatever point I thought you probably would not be aware that I was manipulating you. Like maybe there. Follow that? All right, so that was.
So Richard, it looks like you made a curves adjustment layer and with a mask. did you then invert the mask so
Yeah.
that it would just lighten up the
What I
area?
did is I made, I lightened the whole picture.
Right.
Okay. Now I'd already decided that this was the path that I wanted, but I lightened the whole picture. So then I put a black mask on top of it. And then I painted with white paint that path.
Okay.
So that's how I got it. Okay. So then I added some saturation to the picture. That's what this one does. So I went to hue and saturation, and all I did was pop it up. Remember, you can do it on the various different colors here if you want. But I didn't do it on the magenta. Let me see if I did it on the blues. Yeah, I didn't. On this one, I just did the whole thing. So I just did it on the master, but you can take different colors and master layer. So if I want to add more saturation, that brings it in. And then this mask that's right here brings it just to the mountain. So let's take a look at that. That would be like so. Okay. So I'm only saturating the ground and the sky. I'm not saturating the mountain itself in this one. Okay. So it's down in here. It's very subtle. Then we go back here to whatever it was I decided it was going to be. And I want to say it was probably that one. What I did is I added a gradient layer. Right here. So why would I do that?
Make the mountains stand out from
Make the stouts out, not have you look at this so much. Now, the nice thing about a gradient layer is that I can move it. See? Bring it down. So I can make it so it's darker here and it gets lighter as you go back to mountain. That'll give you the illusion of depth.
Yeah, depth. Yeah.
All right. So, well, this is kind of fun. Then we looked at color lookup tables before. Let's see if we can find that for us. Here, I think. We have color lookup tables right here. Remember those?
Yeah.
So I took a color lookup table and I added moonlight to it. So that's bringing it back to what I saw in the first picture, but in a controlled kind of a way. And then I've talked to you about mid-tone contrast, which helps bring those more definition to the tones in the middle. So that's what this one does. And I think I've given you an action that does that. And then we have talked before about the technique I like to use to add a small vignette to things. So this vignette lightens, and it only lightens a little bit. Click this up here. Remember, this is the one where I take something like this, I lighten it some amount. Let me just get rid of that brush. Delete layer mask. I will take the lasso tool and I say, what is it I really want you to look at? What I really want you to look at is probably this. All right, so that's the part of the picture that I think is important. So I made it brighter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mask on it. Okay. So you definitely know what you're supposed to look at here, right? But that's not very subtle. So remember, this is the one where I take the filter, I do a blur, I do a Gaussian blur, and then I use the number where around what the megapixels of the picture was, of the original camera was. So the 810 is about 34 megapixels. So I just, come on. So now you can't see the line. This is still brighter, right? Yeah. So subconsciously that should tell you what I want that to be. So I change the hue and saturation on it again, just on that layer. And now this one is just the opposite. This is where I do the darkening part. So let's do that. Click on here. So I do a curves adjustment layer, go down, and I make the outside a tad darker. See it?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want you to know that I did that. I want you to look at the Old Manor store, which is brightly lit, but I don't want you to know that that's what you're supposed to look at. I just want you to look at it. And can you see it now? See the path right here?
Yeah.
The path's in
Path's-
there, but you're
path's
not aware
great.
that there's a path there.
Oh.
This is probably a little brighter than I really want it because I can see kind of a glow going here. So it's
Mhm.
not as subtle as I'd like. And I can fix that. Because it's in the layer stack, I can come down here to my curves adjustment layer and say, you know, that was probably a little rambunctious. There we go. You can't see it anymore, right? But it's still there. See it? But it's not as obvious. So that's what those do. And then, just to show you that it's on like how I do it, I have, it's not showing here. Good. So let's turn on. And we've done this
there.
before. Remember?
That's what I was waiting to see.
Okay, so when I did this,
I
this
knew
one-
that was coming.
well, it was done way back here when I did this one.
Ah,
Back when I made the 8x10.
I
that
expected to
on.
see this sooner.
Well, it was down here.
Uh-huh.
I usually put this at the top of the stack so it doesn't get away.
Okay.
But look here, as I built this, part of the path is right here.
Yeah.
Get it? This angle is picked up from here. It's not perfect, but it's not bad
Mhm.
as you add in. And so this is that one I showed you how to make.
Oh.
And because I have the red color up in here, it doesn't have to be red. I just wanted it to be red so I could see it easier.
Mhm.
And I can, because it's red, let's click that. Because it's red, double click here. I could make it, oh, let's take something truly obnoxious, purple. I can turn it to purple. Okay, now it's a purple line. That's what this up here above the grouping is. So that's what that is. And so that's how I made this sucker. And that's my workflow. Now this piece here actually happened way down in here when I was trying to decide how to size it. That wasn't done by accident. So what was the workflow? Certain things happen. I bring my image into Camera Raw and I do as much editing that I can fix there because it's totally non-destructive, right? Anything I do in Camera Raw, I can undo. It doesn't do anything to my pixels. All it does is tells the math how it wants to work. So I do as much as I can there. And I bring it in as a smart object so that I can continue to muck with it. I'm sorry, I can continue to improve on it. If I'm going to play, let's say I wanted to try and bring out the clouds in the sky more, I would make another copy of that camera raw filter using smart object via copy, which means I now have an independent raw image that I can change the sky and blend them together without damaging any of my pixels. That's the cleanest the picture is ever going to be. Everything I do after that is going to degrade the photograph. Unless, of course,
Now,
I'm using
Richard,
soft filter.
Richard, do you use Lightroom as a catalog at all, or
I do
do
it
you
always.
just
I use
filter?
Lightroom
Okay.
for everything.
Okay, I have
Okay,
a,
so are you then exporting them from Lightroom
Yes.
into Camera Raw?
I am.
Okay,
Well, let's say Lightroom and Camera Raw are for all extents and purposes the same thing.
right. So, but you're still using Camera Raw first,
Well,
or are you using Lightroom and then going to Photoshop?
I'm going to, in Lightroom, Okay, we got a couple minutes here. Let me just show you because I think that's probably valid.
Sure.
So here I'm in Lightroom here. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to click it here. I'm going to come up here to develop. And I'm going to do some basic developing here. I'm going to maybe darken it a little bit and add some contrast and maybe bring my highlights down, bring my whites down. All right, so I've done some things here, right? I've done some basic edits here. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to go edit in. Now I could edit in Photoshop and it would just take this picture and put it up. But if I come down here as open as a smart object in Photoshop, I'll click on that. And it's loading it up. So what does it do? It makes a copy of this file and it takes that copy and it sends it up to Photoshop. And it doesn't send it into Camera Raw. It just sends it up into Photoshop. But look
Right.
here.
That's what was happening to me. That's why I was a little confused.
But
when
it's
you
exactly
did it
right.
with Camera.
Because
Right.
look at this. I'm going to click on this.
Yeah.
And here I am in Adobe Camera Raw, right here. And it's got the same settings that I had in Lightroom. Remember, I took the exposure down. I took the contrast up. I moved the whites down.
Sure. Now, how did you click Camera Raw? Did you go up to Filter and choose Camera Raw, or
No.
did you click something else?
Because it came in as a smart object, I can click on it here.
Oh, just clicking the icon itself will. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Let's take this again. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to, I just right clicked in the section. I'm going to do here is I'm going to new smart object via copy.
Okay.
There it is right there. So I've got two smart objects, but they're not linked. They're two independent smart objects. So I'm going to click on this one. And I'm going to say, you know, I wonder if I could bring something out of the sky. So I'm going to bring my exposure down. No, not so much, but maybe. Let's pretend that's what I wanted, that was the sky that I wanted. So now what I can do is I can save this one. Okay. So this smart object has a darker sky, but this smart object has the light sky. Okay. So now I can take this smart object and I can put a mask on it. And then I can say, oh, let me select something here. And I'm going to put the mask on there. And then I would have this. Let's do the sky. I'm on this one. And let's just use it. Select sky. Okay. So see, I selected the sky up in here. Now I'm going to get rid of this mask. Delete layer mask. I'm going to click on this one. And I'm going to put a mask on it. Click. So now it has masked out the building, but left the sky. If I want to do it the other way around, Command I. And now I have the darker building with a lighter sky, all by using this mask. And I haven't degraded any of my pixels.
I do the same. I do this. Right. I do the same thing, except that I do it with Command J and just make copies of the same photo.
Let's do that. All right. So I'm on this one here. We'll go back to this one here. Now I'm going to do Command J. Okay. Command J. I'm going to work on this raw image right here.
Yep.
Click on it. And what am I going to do? Let's fix the color balance, right? So I've changed that. Okay. I've changed the color balance on this one. Guess what? I changed the color balance on this one too. I didn't change the color balance on this one. So this one, where I did Command J, these two raw files are linked. Whatever I do to one, I do to the other.
Oh.
But by doing a new smart object via copy, I can now work with them independently. There, these two are identical.
That's cool.
This one is different.
Oh, that's really cool.
And by the way,
one of the highlights.
and Bob Kennedy taught me that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who did?
Bob Kennedy.
Yeah.
Someone had a question?
I have a question on saving. Once I put everything from Lightroom into Photoshop and I make a bunch of changes, when I save it, it goes back to Lightroom.
Yep.
But I lose my history. What am
You
I
lose
doing wrong?
nothing.
Because when I pull it back,
History is only a one-time deal. They haven't locked that in. History locks in Lightroom, but history doesn't lock in Photoshop, no matter what you do.
so you have to keep it open. If you're working on something, you have to keep it open
Right,
until you're finished with it.
right. Or, you make point. You can do snapshots, but Photoshop does not save the history. History is just a working palette, and you set in the setup how many steps you want it to save. You could have it save hundreds, or you could have it save 10. So, some people who are, just perfect would only have it save maybe 5 or 6 step backs. You can set how many Control Z's you can do to undo things. That's all history is. It is a map or a list of your Control Z's.
But it saves all your layers.
It's
Unless
whatever
I
you've done. It's just like hitting Control Z, back.
You can
That's
take
what
the snapshot.
Yes, but when you close the file, the snapshot goes away too. I mean, that's something I wish they would fix, because it's really a powerful tool, but it's only good while you're working on it in a session. So you're
Okay.
doing nothing wrong. It's just the limitations of the software. All right, did we get something out of value tonight?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Always.
Not like-
What you just covered related to making a copy, in my notes, I starred that because that was one thing that sometimes the smart object via copy, I'd be like, I can't do this. It's gonna just change everything. So that was really
Good. Well, that's why you
key.
do it. So, and
Yeah.
when you're doing that, that's totally non-destructive. And by using adjustment layers, we're being non-destructive. When I do that, that Control Alternate Delete E, that's a destructive issue. It takes everything you've done and makes a new flattened layer. But because we use that technique, we can still turn it off and go underneath and still fix things. So next time we'll do a layer. I'll show you how to save those things to the side and build a workflow. Okay?
That's cool. Awesome.
So as always, questions,
Thank you, Richard.
suggestions, things we
Thank
can
you.
play with,